Good evening, everyone, and warm welcome to this next session. My name is Farah Nayeri. I'm a journalist based in London, and I write on culture for the New York Times. Before I introduce my esteemed guest, I thought I'd tell you, a little story, as I kind of like to do to frame the discussion. I just thought I would basically quote someone who really is not at all a world expert on artificial intelligence, which is going to be the subject of our talk this evening. And that person is British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who happens to run the country where I live. I live in London, as I said, and of course he should probably be focusing on other things right now, meaning how to manage Brexit or not. But he took to the UN General Assembly podium the other day, last week, and he talked all about AI. So here's what Boris said. AI, what will it mean? Helpful robots washing and caring for an aging population, or pink-eyed terminators sent back from the future to cull the human race? What will synthetic biology stand for, he said? Restoring our lives and our eyes with miracle regeneration of the tissues, like some fantastic hangover cure, or will it bring terrifying, limbless chickens to our table? So Boris Johnson really kind of got very exercised about what data and AI can mean for the future. And he said, data is the crude oil of the modern economy. And we're now in an environment, he said, where we don't know who should own these new oil fields, who should have the rights or the title to these gushers of cash. And he said, digital authoritarianism, his words, not mine, is not the stuff of dystopian fantasy, but of an emerging reality. And he concluded, and I will soon be passing the microphone on to the speaker, we need to find the right balance between freedom and control, between innovation and regulation, between private enterprise and government oversight. We must insist, said Boris Johnson, that the ethical judgments inherent in the design of new technology are transparent to all. Now, certainly my next speaker is someone who is much more qualified to talk about artificial intelligence. Reid Blackman is the CEO of Virtue, an ethics consultancy, and he is a prominent voice on many subjects, including artificial intelligence. He taught philosophy for 10 years, and prior to that, I believe, he started a fireworks wholesaling company. He's also a flying trapeze instructor, in case you needed lessons during this Unfinished festival. And so this is a man with many hats. But this evening, we are inviting Reid to the stage with his AI ethics hat on. Welcome, Reid. Thank you.
Thanks so much, everyone. First, I just want to say this event has been absolutely fantastic, and in particular, the organizers have been so great. So I want everyone to join me in thanking Christiane, Ella, and Capucine, and everyone else on the Unfinished team for doing such a great job. So I want to start with just giving you a scenario. I'm going to give you, here's two people. Ready? Person number one. When this person was a teenager, committed 4 misdemeanors, and then one time when the person was 18, stole a bike of a 6-year-old for 1 block. So that's person number one, okay? Person number two committed 2 cases of armed robbery and another case of attempted armed robbery. Wasn't very good at it the 3rd time. So quick question, this is not a trick question. Who's the higher risk for committing another crime? The first person with a childhood 4 misdemeanors, or the second person with the 3 cases of armed robbery? Second one. Second one should be obvious. It wasn't obvious, though, to the judge who was determining what their risk rating was for whether they were going to commit another crime, and so that's relevant to their sentencing. In real life, what happened is person number 1 was rated as very high risk, and person number 2 was rated as very low risk. Two other interesting facts about this case. Number 1, person number 1 was a black woman, and person number 2 was a white man. So obviously you can already see something is amiss. The other interesting fact is that the rating wasn't generated by a person, it was generated by an artificially intelligent algorithm that the judge relied on for sentencing purposes. So somehow you have what looks to be a racist risk rating system in the criminal justice system. In fact, that same program said that when you fix for all the other variables, black people are 75% more likely to commit violent crimes than white people, which is false. So how did this happen? How did this artificially intelligent system get it so wrong? How did it become a discriminatory system? So let me explain how that happened. And it takes just a little bit of understanding of artificial intelligence, or what really is most of artificial intelligence today. It's what's called machine learning. So here's a very quick crash course in machine learning. Suppose you want to train your photo album to recognize when you upload a picture of your new dog, okay? Here's what you do. You take about 1 million pictures of dogs, you upload it into the program, you say those things are dogs, and then the AI algorithm learns some pattern inside those 1 million photos, and when you upload that 1,000,001st photo, if that 1,000,001st photo exhibits the same patterns that are present in those 1,000,000 photos, it'll say, yeah, that's a dog. And if it doesn't, it'll say it's not a dog. That's roughly how machine learning works. It learns by example. Now, real life case. Suppose you're Amazon and you're getting 10,000 resumes a day. You don't have time to read 10,000 resumes a day. So what do? You build an AI software program that will read those resumes for you and green light some and red light others. How do you train it? What are the examples you give? Well, Amazon took 10 years of hiring data, which resumes led to a hire and which didn't. They fed it to the machine and said, recognize whatever pattern is there, and then hire like we've been hiring in the past 10 years. The machine very quickly learned a pattern that Amazon has exhibited over the past 10 years, and so it started red lighting all the resumes by women. It figured out that the pattern is, we don't hire women around here at Amazon. So you have gender discrimination at scale. And this is exactly what happened in the case of the racist risk rating system. It was trained on many years of criminal justice history in the US. And for those of you who know a little bit about the criminal justice system in the US, you know that it exhibits a whole lot of racism. So what it learned is black people are very risky, white people are not, and we got the risk rating that we did. This is a general problem with machine learning. You can build bias and discrimination into a system, even though you've exhibited yourself, even though the engineers themselves exhibit no particular discriminatory or biased attitudes. And there's a range of other issues that are particular to AI. Emerging tech products generally come along with a bunch of ethical risks, but the way that machine learning works gives rise to this particular problem. And the other thing that it allows us to do, or one of the many things it allows us to do, is automate processes. And here's another ethical risk of machine learning. It's going to automate a whole lot of us out of our jobs. A recent study came out of Oxford. In the next 10 to 20 years, almost half, 47% of jobs, are predicted to be replaced by machine learning. And I'm not just talking about Uber drivers or truck drivers. I'm talking about lawyers who read contracts. AI can do it just as well, if not better. I'm talking about doctors, because AI is now better at reading x-rays than radiologists are. So this isn't a blue-collar, white-collar thing. This is we're all screwed, or at least half of us are. Flip a coin. Tails, your job's getting replaced. Heads, it's not. Good luck. And here's another issue that comes along with machine learning. Remember, we're training this thing on data. That's your data, and that's my data. Where's that data coming from? Large companies are tearing through the internet, getting data about you, aggregating it, and selling it. So they're tearing through your Facebook, you know this, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. The credit card companies, they take that data and they sell it. And they know where you're buying, what you're buying, from whom you're buying, how much you're willing to spend on it, yada, 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 yada. So all of this data about you is getting sucked up and fed into their machines. So in other words, the way that machine learning works encourages invasions of privacy. These are just 3 ethical risks of artificial intelligence. There are a lot more. I won't go into them. But let me say, this is a big deal. We are talking about a massive societal impact when a technology can do these kinds of things and encourage these kinds of infringements. What we need to do, I contend, is inject ethics into business in a way we just have not seen before. So let me talk a little bit about who I am, what I've done in trying to bring ethics into the business world in a way we haven't seen before, and then talk about how what businesses can do to mitigate these risks, and how we can encourage them to do it. So, as Farah said, I was a philosophy professor for most of my career, studying, I would call it theoretical ethics. But when I saw certain things going on in the business world and society at large, I thought, okay, we need ethics in a way that we maybe didn't quite need it before, or in a way that people will actually take it up. So I left academia, I started this ethics consultancy, and I want to tell you about one particular case of a client, and I'll tell you what we did to operationalize ethics, because this is the main theme that I want to drive into people. We need to operationalize ethics. We need to build it into workflow. We need to build it in to daily operations, quarterly operations, annual operations, and so on. So the CEO of a small company, they were just 17 people, came to me, and he said, look, we're only 17 people. By the way, the CEO was 25, white guy. He founded this company with his 2 brothers, younger than him. So we're talking, 3 white guys, 20 to 25, all former student athletes. We have this company. It's going well. We're 17 people. Only 3 of them are women. Someone made a sexually explicit comment the other day. Someone made a Jewish joke in front of our Jewish CFO. The culture is toxic. I don't know how to fix this. Can we fix this? So I said, sure. So this is what we did together. Number 1, we wrote an ethics statement together. And when I say ethics statement, I don't mean the regular corporate boilerplate BS about trust and integrity and doing the right thing, because no one gives a shit about that. It doesn't do anything. It's just boilerplate stuff that no one actually cares about. It sounds good, it makes for PR, you have to put it out there, but it doesn't actually mean anything in practice. Enron touted the values of trust and integrity, didn't really work out for them. So we wrote this ethics statement, and I pushed the senior leadership there to say something of substance, not just the superficial stuff. And since I'd been a professor for, over 10 years, I knew how to push and call BS and challenge until we got an ethics statement of real substance. It wasn't just thin concepts like the right thing and do good. And once we were done, I said, all right, look, that's a great start, but this too is BS unless we translate it into process and practice. If it just stays on the page, it doesn't mean anything. You can't rely on your employees to read that ethics statement, have a change of heart and mind, and then suddenly live up to it. That's not how it works, especially if they're financially incentivized not to be ethical. So we have to build it into process. So let me give you one example of this. They said that they value diversity. Remember, this is 17 people, only 3 women, 3 white guy founders. And so I said, okay, great, this is the ethics statement. So now we have to put it into practice. We got to bake it into process. And immediately he got scared. This is one thing that you have to overcome when you want to inject ethics into a business. You have to overcome the person's fear of injecting ethics. He was afraid that I was going to tell him, you now have to hire a woman because she's a woman, and you now have to hire a person of color because they're a person of color. And he said, I'm not doing that. Absolutely not. The best player plays, blah, blah, blah. So one thing that I had to do was say, look, relax. I hereby promise you, whatever we do, it's not going to be that. And it wasn't until that I could quell his fears of getting him to do something he really objected to that he would even listen to a conversation about what we can do to operationalize it. And so we did operationalize it in ways that he and the rest of the senior leadership and the rest of the company found acceptable. I won't go into the details now. Q&A, I'm happy to. But we instituted things that, in short, made sure to diversify the pool of candidates when they were doing the hiring. Fast forward 10 months. They've now more than tripled in size. There are something like 60 to 70 people now. Of the 15 senior leaders, not including the 3 founders, of the 15 senior leaders, 12 of those 15 are women. The average salary for a man in that company is $70,000. The average salary for a woman in that company is $94,000. So there was real impact from the way that we operationalized ethics. Notice, this wasn't about just being aware of problems. It wasn't a higher consciousness. It wasn't about even just people should care more. That stuff doesn't do anything. You've got to bake it into process to make sure that those values get realized in workflow, in everyday operations. There's lots more examples of this, but I'll go on. Happy to talk more about it at Q&A. But now let's ask for a second, take a step back. Why should businesses care? Why should they care about ethics in a way that they haven't before? What's changed? Why should the tech companies really take ethics seriously? And I'm happy to say that I think there actually is a reason, and it's one that we can push more. Consumers and employees, especially millennials and Gen Zers, they care about ethics in a way we haven't seen before, number one. And number two, they have the power of social media to broadcast those views and to build coalitions. Hashtag delete Facebook, hashtag delete Uber, hashtag boycott Starbucks, hashtag me too. The list goes on, and these are ways that consumers have shamed companies, they've boycotted companies, and companies are beginning to wise up to this. What's more, at the end of 2018, Deloitte put out a survey, said 55% of millennials and Gen Zers who see their employer as prioritizing profit over people plan to leave within 2 years. Again, over half of the millennials and Gen Zers, the fastest growing segment of employees, plan to leave a company that prioritizes profit over people. Now, if you're a business and you don't give a shit about ethics, but you really care about your bottom line, now you got to care about ethics because you care about employee retention. So why should businesses care now? Obviously, they should care because it's the right thing to do. It's good, blah, blah, blah. I'm an ethicist. I get it. I know. But that does not historically actually move businesses. What does move businesses is reputational risk. And we're now living in a time, thankfully, when ethical risk is reputational risk. And so they have a real reason to take it seriously. So what are the things that tech businesses, especially those using and developing AI, can actually do? I want to highlight 4 things that the businesses can do, and then I want to highlight the things that you can do, that I can do, we can all do. Number 1, they can do the whole ethics statement and operationalize that ethics statement thing. We've seen companies do this to some extent. Google came out with their 7 principles for AI. Microsoft did the same thing. Those principles are remarkably similar. You'll notice if you look at those principles that they're basically vacuous. Pursue justice. Yeah, okay. Now, everyone's on board with pursue justice, but Trump thinks he's pursuing justice, and the Democrats think they're pursuing justice, and so this doesn't actually move us anywhere, right? But they can write ethics statements of real substance, and they can operationalize those. But this can't be the only solution in the case of tech. And one of the reasons is that writing an ethics statement and doing the operationalizing of it is very important, but it's also very difficult, and it takes a bunch of time. It's the long-term plan, and it's a great long-term plan. Businesses should do it. We should encourage them to do it, but it's not enough because it's long-term, and we have some very real problems right now. But that's one thing they can do and they should do. The second thing is they can institute a due diligence process, an ethical risk due diligence process in the development of their AI, ideally in the concept phase. So they're thinking about, okay, here's the product that we want to create, here's the problem we want to solve. Let's look out for the ethical risks now and make sure that we avoid including these features, or we make sure to include those other ones to mitigate the various ethical risks that we see coming down the line. And then you need a follow-up team to make sure, 50, 80% into the production of this thing, did we actually do the things we said we were going to do to mitigate those risks? So that's the second one, a due diligence process at important joints of the operational workflow. And by the way, it's important that the team be multidisciplinary. I think the due diligence team needs ethicists, needs engineers, needs sociologists and anthropologists, and so on. Now, a due diligence process is really, really important. I think it's probably the single most important thing that companies need to do, but it's never going to be perfect. A due diligence process doesn't guarantee ethical perfection. It's about being responsible. And that brings me to the third thing that companies need to do. They need to have impact assessment teams. Look, we've rolled it out. We've tried to make sure that we avoided certain kinds of ethical risks. Now let's look at, we tried looking around the corner. We can't see everything. So now you need an impact team to make sure that we see the things that we didn't see earlier. And then that team has to be able to feed back to the due diligence team and the developers so that in future iterations of the product, those things can be fixed. And the fourth and final thing that I urge businesses to do is to form ethics committees. We see this in hospitals right now. Hospitals, they have an IRB, right, when they're doing clinical trials. So that's akin to the due diligence process I'm suggesting. But hospitals have ethics committees when they run into particular difficult cases. And so it's really important to have ethics committees when certain kinds of difficult cases, whether it's in the product itself or how the product is deployed, say who you're going to sell it to, is done. So it's crucial that there's an ethics committee, and again, that should be a multidisciplinary committee with a clearly defined jurisdiction, and really importantly, clearly defined powers, where that power hopefully goes beyond they make recommendations. The power to veto would be a very good start for making an ethics committee with real teeth. As far as I know right now, any ethics committee in any tech company, they make recommendations in the form of a report, and I have no idea whether anybody reads them, and no one does because it's not transparent. So those are the things that businesses can do. Now, I want to say a little bit about what you can do, and then I want to wrap up, and we'll have some Q&A. So one thing that you can do in your capacity as citizens, of course, is to talk to government officials about what are we doing about AI and bias and privacy infringements and automation and the job loss that's coming down the pipeline. What are we doing about those things? And we need to be really careful about what kind of tech gets created and how it's deployed. So that's one thing you can do in your capacity as citizens. The other thing that you can do, and I really don't want you to underestimate this, I think this is phenomenally powerful, is in your capacity as employees. Companies are listening to their employees, they're scared of losing them, and employees have more power than they think. And it doesn't have to take the form of outright activism. Have constructive conversations internally. Raise the issue to your managers. Hey, what kind of AI are we taking on now? Say in the human resources department where AI is rampant and HR people are not at all looking at the ethical pitfalls of AI. Talk to those HR managers, talk to your manager, talk to other people around and say, hey, there's massive technological change coming down the pipeline. We should make sure that as our company adopts this stuff, there's some kind of due diligence done. There's some kind of ethical standard that needs to be met. This is a huge problem. There's not a silver bullet. I've outlined 4 things that businesses can do, but we're all going to have to work together if we're going to make AI actually safe for everyone. Thank you. So who's got questions? And if you have no questions, I'll play the drums. Not well.
Oh, this is working now, into the financial statement of the company. And based on that ethics evaluation of the activities of the company, employee rights, equality, sustainability, whatever you want, this would be the basis for the calculation of the tax that this company is due to pay on its profit.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an economist, so I can't speak to all of that, but that sounds great. I mean, one thing that I mentioned sort of offhandedly during the talk was that it's really important to financially incentivize ethics, or at least financially disincentivize unethical conduct. So that sounds like a great step forward. Does that answer your question?
Yeah,
I mean,
I guess.
You can say no.
No, it does. I'm just excited about this possibility, and I would wish that this, like right now, this is only really known in Germany and Austria, so I would wish this would be on a stage like this idea.
I'll try next time. Who else? Again, I just see 2 bright lights.
Hi.
Hi.
Just a quick question, but an introduction first. So artificial intelligence is programmable, yeah, by humans.
Sure.
So actually, it's our problem at the end, yeah, the ethics. So you're doing consultancy on the ethics issue for the companies?
Yeah.
The quick question is, who's hiring you, the CEOs or very top management
Yeah,
people?
that's a great question. So who's hiring me? It's odd because there's not a single kind of buyer. In smaller companies, it's usually the CEO, sometimes it's COO. One of my clients is Ernst & Young. They recently put together an AI advisory board, and I think the person who put together that advisory board, and it's sort of ethics focused, is their global head of AI, and that person is an engineer. I'm seeing a lot of the responsibility for ethical AI falling on the shoulders of the engineers, and so usually it's the person in the engineering team who's highest up.
So it goes down below from the CEOs. This was my concern, actually.
So is the question
if the CEOs is hiring you, the implementation goes down to the last employer of your ethics, your method, yeah? So you don't just stick to the CEO.
Oh, no. I don't just speak to the CEO, no.
That was my question.
Yeah. I mean, it also depends on the size of the organization. So the CEO of Ernst & Young didn't directly hire me, right? It was the global head of AI. But if it's a smaller company like a startup, and some of my clients are startups, yeah, then it's the CEO or the COO. Yeah, there's 2 questions there, one over there. We have 3 minutes, so speak like an auctioneer.
How do you embed ethical process in designing AI?
Say that again.
How do you embed an ethical process in designing AI?
How do you get ethical process into the design of AI? I mean, there's a lot of ways. I mean, I think that the due diligence process is really key. I mean, look, if you care about privacy and you care about bias, for instance, before you start building and training your algorithm, you might think, okay, what kind of data do we need? Where do we have to get it from? How was it sourced? Is it, fair trade data? What are we doing with it? What are we inferring from it? Could we be accidentally training the thing to be biased? And then you actually have to do the qualitative investigations. But again, it's got to be baked into workflow. It can't be something that you just rely on for engineers to be thoughtful. It has to be, no, this is just what we do as a matter of course whenever we develop AI.
My question is a little bit related to that.
Yeah.
I know that in artificial intelligence there is this black box problem where sometimes it takes decisions we don't know why it took them. So can you please just talk a little bit about how that's infused into the process of, because sometimes we don't know why it took those decisions that are actually, it's called, I know, the explanatory problem in AI. Like how does it play into your process of
why does explainability matter? Yeah, so thank you. One of the big issues with AI is that oftentimes the algorithm is noticing patterns that we as humans would never pick up. So take the dog example. When we see a dog, we'll look at certain things to determine whether it's a dog or not. When we see a photo of an animal, we look at certain things to see whether it's a dog. The algorithm looks at things at like the pixel level. And so the pattern it recognizes is not really intelligible to us. And so that means that we're going to get outputs like that person has a high risk rating, that person should be denied a mortgage, that person should have a bad credit rating score, that person shouldn't get hired, that person's insurance premium should be really high. We get outputs that we can't explain. We don't know how it got there. This is a real problem. There are some cases in which I don't think explainability is absolutely ethically necessary. If you use it to sort of place bets in the stock market and the person that is placing those bets is fully informed, hey, we don't really know how this thing gives an output. We just know what the accuracy rates are, and that's all you really care about. You're willing to take that bet? Fair enough. To me, the problem with explainability is usually that we give explanations to each other when we treat each other certain ways, especially badly, out of respect. It's a symptom or an expression of respect for someone when we don't just treat them poorly, but we say, look, here's the rationale for it, right? So, look, you're going to prison. Here's why you're going to prison. You did this and that other thing, and so that warrants getting put in prison. It would be really cruel to just, pick someone off the street and throw them in prison without telling them, or just to treat a friend poorly and then just refuse to tell them why you're treating them poorly. So I actually think that one of the biggest issues with explainability is that it showcases a lack of respect. I am overdue. We're done. Thank you so much.